Well, I can't dwell on it anymore. One thing's for sure. One day, I'll have it back, Ryuk said, stepping away from the mirror. He moved to the wardrobe, grabbing a short-sleeved black shirt and matching trousers. Then, he picked up one of the scarves meant to be worn around the neck, wrapped it around himself, and let the rest drape over his shoulders. One glance back at the mirror showed a clear difference. Now, at least he looked like a person. His hand reached for his bag, pulling out a comb. He brushed his messy hair into long, flowing strands of ocean blue behind him. Some parts of the left side covered his eyes, which he disliked, so he picked up a tiny thread and tied his hair, keeping it in place. Now I look a bit better, but without my strength, it's nothing. So I need to get back my power, he said aloud. He moved out of the bedroom, turned off the lights, and stepped into the living room, heading for the exit. Pushing on the glass door, he gave one last look around. His eyes scanned everything, taking note of the positions of even the tiniest objects before he finally stepped out and shut the door behind him, the lights switching off with a click. The sound of howling was the first thing he heard the instant his staff touched the ground. Ryuk's eyes flashed, scanning the area. There was nothing. Yet the howl was loud, and his clothes and hair flapped wildly against his neck. Quite the breeze. But I'm close to the edge of the mountain, he mused. He fully stepped off the stone floor of his house and began walking into the distance, straight toward the tip of the mountain. The sky had gone dark. The sun had vanished, leaving only flickering stars above. In this world, there were countless bright stars, along with green lights circling through the sky. It was a beautiful scene, albeit unfamiliar. When he looked down from the edge of the valley to the Royalty Children's training grounds, he noticed they were all gone. Even the instructor was no longer there, leaving the place silent and desolate. Ryuk looked from where he stood to the ground below, roughly a 25-meter drop. His gaze sharpened. Hey, system, if I jumped from here and landed on my head, would I be injured? He asked mentally. Yes, host. Landing on your head will leave you disoriented, and it will take time to recover. Hoo! Ryuk exhaled deeply as he looked at the drop beneath him. His hand slowly tightened around his staff. It's the only way down. The wind roared against his face as his body tore through the air, gravity pulling him down with fierce speed. As he neared the ground, his left hand stabbed toward the mountain wall. His claws pierced through like butter, dragging through the terrain. The force of it slowed him just enough. He landed on his feet and rolled once before regaining his balance. Rising with the help of his staff, his eyes drifted to his clawed hands. They flashed faintly. I might not be able to control it well, but the tips of these claws can pierce through nearly anything. That's good, he muttered, then turned his attention to his surroundings. Where he had landed, just a few steps ahead, was the only green patch where the children and their instructor had once sat. Ryuk walked forward, the only sounds being the howling wind and his staff clanking softly against the ground with each step. After walking for 10 minutes, he realized that the longer he walked, the easier it became. So he continued on, aimlessly wandering for over an hour, until he finally arrived. A plain of endless green, but not only that. Before him were massive, round stones, each the size of a standing man. Around 25 of them stood in the area. To the side, a shelf held an array of various weapons. Most were swords, but there were also a few axes and spears. What caught his eyes, though, was a strange runic platform in the center. Walking toward it, Ryuk knelt down to get a closer look. It was made of silvery white material, its surface etched with unusual runic lines. Cautiously, he reached out, his fingers tracing along the edges of the runes before pressing slightly on the surface. In the next instant, a powerful silvery ripple surged out from the point he touched, spreading across the field. Ryuk watched as silvery glass began covering the entire area, but it wasn't the only change. In an instant, new structures began emerging from the silver-covered ground. Various areas extended outward as far as the garden once did. The setting had changed. What was once an empty grassy field with scattered stones and weapons now transformed into a fortress holding various chambers, terrain simulators, and isolated zones. As the light faded, a panel appeared in front of Ryuk's face, and he read the contents. Welcome to the setting expansion, Remy-Or Plateau Fortress, known as the Kazuran Base, a gift from High Scholar Emirs. This installation was built to train royal children from total beginners to above-average Silberunic warriors. Various zones can now be accessed. Host can choose environments, adjust conditions, gravity, temperature, terrain, and set custom time drills. The zones are generated via a combination of spatial fold tech and dual biome chambers. Common selected zones include 1. Track Zone. Purpose: agility plus endurance training. 2. Gravity Sink Zone. Purpose: raw strength plus core stabilization. 3. Obstacle Matrix Zone. Purpose: reflex plus agility. 4. Impact Chamber. Purpose: endurance plus physica. Reinforcement. 5. Combat Gauntlet Zone. Purpose: strength plus reaction sync. Ryuk hummed as he looked at the notifications and his eye flashed, and he decided to begin form the basic. Activate Track Zone. As he pressed his hands on the interface, a quiet hum resonation across the plane. He watched as the simulation began deconstructing itself around him, and his eyes flashed with disbelief as he unconsciously muttered, "This is next level." From an area where nothing lay but an endless glass plane, in an instant, it morphed into a region filled with different simulations. Then, just as quickly, they disappeared, leaving the land bare and of nothing but silvery glass once more before the true transformation of the track terrain began. The console pulsed, and in a wide circle around him, even beneath the ground, an endless turning circuit began forming. The track was made of a strange dark composite, almost like black stone, infused with faint blue veins of energy pulsing at regular intervals, stretching far, far into the distance. Markings appeared along the lanes. Spirit lanes, acceleration markers, and hurdle beams occasionally shimmered in and out of existence across the track. In some parts of the track, Ryuk noticed the terrain itself shifting, going from dark track stone to loose gravel, then to loose sand, and even into viscous mud, each ever-changing. A low voice resounded through the area. Track zone scanning according to Taker's stats. A blue wave of light flashed, scanning Ryuk's entire body before it disappeared. And then the words rang out once more. Level detected. Track zone. Calibration level 1-. Training mode. Mixed. Pursuit ghosts. Disabled to low level. Time trial. Disabled to low level. Good luck, Silverunic. The notification flashed as Ryuk's eyes flickered at the last one before he exhaled and gazed down at the track before him. It was a run of about 500 meters, something the person he once was could cover in exactly 0.000146 seconds at Mach 100 speed. But now, Ryuk inhaled deeply and gripped his staff hard, looking at the long stretch of the track ahead. He clenched his jaw. System quest activated. Complete the track zone a total of 50 times, each time 1 minute faster than the previous, without stopping for a single breath. Rewards. Plus 100 stat points unlocked on every locked stat. A low-ranked rejuvenation pill that cures exhaustion. Oh, thank you, Ryuk said dryly, rolling his eyes at the notification. You're welcome, host. TCH, I can barely walk, and you want me to run 50 times back and forth, each faster than before? Yeah, just kill me already. Ryuk shot back, but the system wasn't having it. Shut up. You once ran at Mach 100 to propose to your golden-haired girlfriend. 500 meters back then would have been crossed in 0.000146 seconds. Less than a blink, and now you're complaining? TCH. The system's words shook Ryuk's heart a little. Is it just me, Ryuk thought? Or has the system gotten chattier? It's always been so silent. Now it's talking more and more, and it feels familiar. He stared at the blinking notification panel, which had also subtly changed. What's wrong, host? Nothing, Ryuk said, eyeing the panel before his gaze grew serious and he steadied himself on the track ahead. I used to cross this distance in less than a blink. Walking with a staff or not, this isn't something beyond me. If I ever wish to return back to Endearth, if I ever wish to defeat that bird Null, if I ever wish to take back my body, if I ever want to see Morgaine again, then I have to do this. His hands released the staff, letting it drop to the ground. His knees buckled slightly without its support, but his gaze didn't waver. What was this pain compared to the hell he had already survived? This, Ryuk thought as he took a single step forward, wobbling as he did so. Yet his second leg was already mimicking forward as he used it to prop himself. Before he could fall, he'd already taken the next step. 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 This. It started as simple steps, one by one, moving his body that seemed to sink heavier and heavier. But then the steps grew faster and faster until they turned into a jog. After a couple of minutes, it turned into a run as Ryuk began moving into the distance. This is nothing. Now it was a full-blown athletic human sprint. Minor neural synchronization achieved. 2% motor response calibrated. Faster. Ryuk gritted his teeth, forcing his right leg to lunge forward. A roar of pain followed, but the steps weren't collapsing. His steeled feet struck the ground more solidly as he continued racing forward. Faster. His legs were burning heavy with strain. Every nerve boiled in agony, yet he could feel it. They were getting faster. The more pain he felt, the faster they became. And as he continued, the world began rapidly changing, turning into a smear of silver and blue. Neural lag compensation. 5%. Faster. The word echoed in his head as his breath thickened within him. His eyes settling into a horrifying calm as his body began lowering to the ground, and he shoved every ounce of strength into the sprint. 500 meters crossed. Calibration level has reached level 2. The words of the simulation rang out, and everything began lengthening even more, yet, boom. A mini-quake surrounded him and instantly the sound changed. No more steps at all. No more breathing. Just a howling void before him as Ryuk instinctively turned into a blur. Boom! This time it was louder as he tore through the air with so much speed. A circular barrier of air exploded outward from him. Host has reached Mach 1. Minor neural synchronization achieved. 10% motor response calibrated. Calibration level will now be taken to level 5. The simulation voice rang out, but Ryuk couldn't hear the words anymore. Something was screaming within him. Something roaring out a single word. Faster. Minor neural synchronization achieved. 20% motor response calibrated. Boom. Congratulations. Host has reached Mach 5. Congratulations. Host has reached Mach 10. Calibration level will now be taken to level 20. Mission completed. New mission issued. Reach Mach 50. He screamed out of his lungs, and in the next instant his blue pupils began changing. Their outer edge began rotating within him, and soon they became spinning vortex that sent out blue light through the entire simulation. The next step and the world changed. The sound of gentle footsteps echoed through the glassy ground, as a figure walked up the silvery glass stairs, bearing a blue illumination with every step. Eventually, it continued up until it fully reached the end, coming to a stop. Around was a balcony that opened to the sky, and reclining on the silvery iron surrounding the balcony was a man who had his back faced to him, but then turned his head as if he could feel his gaze on him. "Orimis, my son." The words echoed through the top of the area, melding with the wind and reaching Orimis, whose eyes flashed as he walked forward, coming to arrive by the man's side. "Father, you're outside tonight." Orimis, the king of the Silverunics, replied to his father, High Scholar Emeries, who smiled in return. "I have only been within due to my endless study and the model fusion. Now that it's done, I thought it would be best to come taste the air." High Scholar Emeries said with a chuckle, as the king smiled before he asked, "And how is it, father?" "The smell of the air. Different. Its scent is good and calming," he replied as King Orimis nodded. "The passing of time. It goes as fast as a blink, doesn't it, father? King Oremes asked, looking at his father who looked into the distance, silent for a long while, before he slowly began to nod. It does, Oremes, from the smell of chaos and destruction, the unmistakable poison that filtered everywhere, staining the etheric energy of our ancestral home. That war, and now the peace, he whispered. The passing of time truly goes as fast as a blink. You are right, father, Oremes replied before he also reclined on the balcony, looking far into the distance, before his gaze settled on his father, who also looked to be gazing into the future. But Oremes loved this gaze more. This gaze that seemed so close by. It was rare. I've received some good news that Eliana and Filiana have mastered the last of the lesser runic pattern memorization, runic pattern 999. And the rest of the remaining royalty kids are not that far off, Oremes said, as High Scholar Emeries chuckled. Those little girls of mine, touching on the precipice of strength now, aren't they? Ha 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 ha. High Scholar Emeries said with a proud, fatherly laughter. In fact, they are. The talent of Filiana and Emilian is almost out of this world. Although, now that they both were given birth to in this era of peace, what strength used to be is perhaps not the same, King Oremes said as High Scholar Emeries turned to him, shaking his head. Don't see it in such a way, Oremes. To have those girls not see the horror of the past is a good thing for us both as fathers. They have talents, but their battle prowess might be lower due to the era they were born in, and that is good, Oremes. I would have gladly traded away my battle prowess in exchange for that war never happening, High Scholar Emeries said, his eyes flashing a silvery light as Oremes nodded his head. You are right, but now that they have reached such a level, perhaps it is time they cross from an average Silverunic to defenders. Their coming of age? High Scholar Emeries asked as King Oremes nodded his head. Yes, father. You know, Oremes, in the past, the test from a soldier to a defender used to be very simple. Go along with a batch of defenders into the battlefield, and if you can return alive, you will be given the title of a defender. It was the long ancient tradition, and a good tester of whether one was worth to be something more or remain less, High Scholar Emeries said as Oremes nodded his head. And remaining less usually equals death back then too, father. The average soldiers are killed off in the battlefields, and the defenders return. That's what made us so strong and why the test was important. It gets rid of the weak genes amongst us, leaving just the strongest. Cruel, wasn't it, Oremes? High Scholar Emeries flashed a humorous smirk at King Oremes, whose eyes flashed before he responded. Extreme times beget extreme means. There was no other choice back then. The weak must be weeded out, leaving the strong, King Oremes said, unflinching, as High Scholar Emery's face flashed with pride. Very well said, my son. Very well said. But now, father, that the time has changed, I am in doubt of what is to be done in the new soldiers coming of age. Now that the battlefield is gone, how would they be tested for? Why not just name them defenders? You are the king, aren't you? High Scholar Emeries said with a smile, as Oremes shook his head. No, that can't be done. And why is that? Time may have changed, but the ancestral traditions must be held irrespective of time. They must be tested and tested hard, in one way or the other. A defender isn't just a name. It's a title of honor that must be earned. Oremes replied vehemently. Then what do you suggest, Oremes? I'm afraid my mind is blank, and that is why I have come to you, father, for your suggestion. King Oremes said as High Scholar Emeries flashed, settling into thought, but it had barely been a few seconds before a smile appeared on his lips. An extremely cold one. You want to keep the name of honor that the defenders used to hold? Isn't it, Oremes? The war may have passed, but you want tradition to be upheld. Yes, father. To us Silverunics, the traditions are beyond even our lives. If so, then, I have an idea. And what may that be, father? King Oremes asked as he looked at his father, whose own eyes turned their gaze to him. The air at the back of his neck rose when he saw that cold, predatory gaze. That one that he was more than used to. Send all of the average Silverunic soldiers, royalty or common, to the gate of soulless ruin. What? The gate of soulless ruin? King Arimes said, barely able to keep his cool, judging by how he snapped his head to look at High Scholar Amiris, who chuckled, pointing at his face before laughing out loud, as King Arimes also laughed in return. You got me there for a second, father, King Arimes said, as High Scholar Amiris shook his head. You, Arimes, he suddenly called, as King Arimes turned to him. You are the one who has gotten softer after the war, he said, as King Arimes' eyes flashed. It's just the gate of soulless ruin, father. That was what we all used to fear. It's a punishment ground, father. One where most Silverunicair lost. Have you forgotten the truths around it, Arimes? High Scholar Amirs asked. It is said that a sinner should be cast into the gate of soulless ruin. If they are indeed innocent, then they shall come back in one piece, and those who deserve to be punished will lose themselves within, King Arimes said before he shook his head. But we both know, father, that so-called rule is but a lie after all. The soulless ruin is difficult. A world more difficult as one goes up the floors. Those who return only return because of their strength and the fact that they were sent to the lower floors, he said as High Scholar Amirs chuckled. Send the kids into it, Arimes, High Scholar Amirs said. King Arimes locking eyes with his father and finding no humor light in his eyes at all, which meant he was truly dead serious. But father, place a teleportation rune on the entrance to the third gate of the soulless ruin. That's low enough. If they made their way through the second gate and reached the footsteps of the third gate, then that is enough to mark them as defenders. Isn't that right, Arimes? High Scholar Amirs said, as King Arimes' eyes shook before he exhaled deeply. The third level is manageable for guardians and truly enough to test them. You're right, father, King Arimes said, as Amiris nodded before he added. Announce this to the kingdom. And also add that all those who return will be allowed into the soulful ruin of Niagara, he said, as King Arimes' eyes flashed in shock. The soulful ruin of Niagara? That is one of our race's most respected grounds. The secret source of our Aetheris power, King Arimes said as his eyes flashed. The ruin mentioned was what made their Silverunic race so strong, but not only that. It was what made them capable of turning from a race about to be destroyed in war to a race that would come to rule the entire world. I understand, Arimes. But father, the strength required to open those gates. I'm afraid only you have such monumental power. But even you will be quite drained after that, he said as High Scholar Amiris smiled. It's okay, Arimes. A simple gate wouldn't render me unable to stand on my feet. And now is the era of peace. I won't need my strength now. Why not temporarily give it to the kids instead? All the average Silverunic soldiers that emerge from the soulless ruin will be tested harder than the kids of the ancient past. But in return, they would get even more reward than the past defenders. After their visit to the ruin, they would grow even stronger, and who knows, perhaps your daughters will one day be able to stand toe-to-toe with me in terms of potential. Even if they don't, I would at least be confident of true protectors in the future. Truly, we might be in the era of peace now, but it won't hurt to leave future protectors down in case. After all, the darkness only hides away. It never truly leaves, does it? He said with a smile, as King Arimes nodded his head. Very well, father. The news will be announced. All the preparations will be made, and the children will undergo their test in the next week, he said, as High Scholar Amiris nodded. Then that is done, Arimes, he said, as silence settled above the balcony before suddenly. A bizarre ripple suddenly surged from the distance as both King Arimes and High Scholar Amiris instinctively turned their heads toward the dark distance, silvery light flashing from the depth of their eyes. The void is being pierced at very fast speed, but in a rotatory motion, is one of the Guardians training. King Arimes mused under his breath, but then his eyes narrowed. But that direction? That is the direction of the Royalty Children training area. Why would a guardian be training there? Perhaps I should check it out, he said as he rose from the balcony and prepared to move, only for a hand to rise up as High Scholar Amiris stopped him. Leave it to me, Orimis. I will check. And hopefully I get to exercise a bit. Ha ha ha, he said. And in the next instant, boom! The building that both of them stood on suddenly tilted to the side as King Orimis watched as a silvery light tore into the void and disappeared in less than a blink, bringing along with it a powerful ripple of space. In an instant, his father had disappeared. Even after so many years, you're still the same monster, father. King Orimis said as his hand stretched toward the ripples in the distance, a silvery aura blooming out of his hands. Silvery runes clung quickly and neatly forward and began repairing the ripples in the space, returning it to what they once were. I just hope you don't cause too much chaos with your exercise, he added, chuckling at the thought of his father causing chaos in their sacred ground, before he walked away, climbing down the stairs and disappearing back into the royal palace. A bizarre hum rang out softly through the clouds, coming from none other than High Scholar Amiris, whose eyes flashed with silvery light as he looked at the scene below him, the scene of rupturing space in a circular line, as something revolved around, blazing with intents before they finally came to a stop, collapsing on both knees while heaving out loudly. Interesting. Ah! The sound of turbid exhaling rang out through the track, coming from none other than Ryuk, who was on both knees, hands by his side as turbid white breath left both his lips and nose. Congratulations on host completing the quest. Reach Mach 50. Rewards. Plus 150 extra stat points in agility have been unlocked. Total rewards obtained from all completed quests. Plus 100 stat points on every locked stat. Plus 150 points in agility stats. Plus 1 low-ranked rejuvenation pill that eliminates exhaustion. Use the rejuvenation pill, Ryuk immediately ordered in his head, and in the next instant, his breath hitched in place as he felt an extremely cold energy wave pour out from his heart, meandering through his body. The hotness and exhaustion he felt instantly faded away. He watched in a few seconds as his breathing finally slowed down and his exhaustion disappeared in a blink, resulting in him instantly rising to his feet. A few steps around, and Ryuk's eyes flashed as he noticed he didn't even need any support at all. He had regained control of his body, but not only that. Activate stats, he ordered. Stats. Strength. 1,700 locked. Agility. 1,650 locked. Endurance. 1,850 locked. Intelligence. 390. Charisma. 200. Luck. Null. Attribute points available. 1060. Very good. I'm already close to my previous stat points in agility. Now I'm at 350. 50 more stat points and I'll reach 400. My previous peak. Ryuk thought as he clenched his palms before he turned back to the track. The simulation surprisingly held well. I thought it would have shattered from rotating in a circle. Ryuk mused to himself as he looked at the track, which had gone from being straight to being in a circular format so he could continue running while improving his speed. It was also a good thing that he didn't have to manually increase the track level and it was naturally increasing by itself based on Ryuk's speed output. Now with the track zone out of the way, perhaps it's time for the next zone, he muttered aloud before quickly tapping on the panel. Activate gravity sync zone? Immediately, the zone was clicked. The track zone shattered like glass under his feet. The ground peeled away like mist and the sky began twisting, folding inward toward Ryuk. A new zone was instantly simulated. Zone transition. Gravity sync initiated. Boom! The sudden descent made Ryuk unconsciously tumble forward, his hands reaching for the ground only to stop at the last second as his eyes locked down beneath him. The ground had changed from the silvery glass to something that resembled pure black stone. The air itself had suddenly become heavy, and then a pulse materialized above his head as he lifted himself up and looked at the sky. Above his head directly, floating about a meter away, was a rough, jagged, and rounded boulder about 2 meters in diameter. It was levitating with blue energy swirling around it. Directive of gravity track zone. Carry load and adaptation leads to level increase. New system quest initiated. Reach level 25 of gravity sink zone. Rewards. 1. Plus 200 stat points unlocked in strength stats. 2. Plus 1 low-ranked rejuvenation pill that heals exhaustion. Gravity sink level 1 will commence. The panel flashed as Ryuk inhaled, watching as the huge stone began falling, and his eyes flashed before he raised both hands up to meet it. Here goes nothing. He mused silently as his hands finally met that lovely surface, and then, boom! Ryuk seemed to feel a tremor radiating through his entire body, as his elbows buckled under the strain of the stone, his neck unconsciously sneaking downward and his knees vibrating. This is only level 1? He asked through clenched teeth, but then his eyes flashed as a grin appeared on his lips. In the next instant, his straining legs instantly stopped, and his fingers dug into the end of the stone before. The air flapped as Ryuk forcefully pushed the stone above his head. Level 1 completed. These factor accessed. Normal. TSK, that's all you got, huh? Level 5 activated. Wait, what? Boom. The stone's height instantly jumped from 2 meters in diameter to 10 meters in diameter, resembling a huge mountain rock, and the gravity seemed to have been multiplied by a few tens of factors. Every molecule in his body screamed out as the weight of the rock doubled, and yet kept increasing with every second. The ground beneath him began groaning from the gravity, his feet tearing through it, elbows slowly giving way. The rock pressed down on his neck, veins popping on his forehead. TCH. Ryuk felt every single inch of it, his body reeling from the unimaginable weight, his muscles seemingly writhing, bones twisting, and nerves firing in agony as his teeth clenched tightly and he struggled to lift. But the more he struggled, yet more he became something far more than terrifying. An evolution in real time. The nanobots within him, along with the blue-infused crystals, began reacting to the overload. His body hardened, as a sharp crack sliced through the air, and for a moment, the pain almost made Ryuk forget why he even existed. His arms trembled slightly, but the rock, the massive living mountain, remained hard in his grip, gripped tight by the claws. The nanobots began surging to life, their intricate micromechanics fusing with his bodily cells, rewiring his body's structure, amplifying his strength with every passing second. Gravity sink zone. Level 5, 3x strength gravity. Load material density. 15,000 tons. Body mutation in progress. 18%. Pain level. Severe. The notification flashed before his gaze as he clicked his tongue. Severe? This is still nothing. Ryuk roared in his head as his legs gripped the ground hard, and then with a loud roar, his arms strained madly, lifting the rock up away from his neck, and with one final push, he fully pressed it overhead, vibrating intensely as he finally managed to stabilize the stone about 50 centimeters above his head. Level 5 completed. Difficulty accessed. Hard. Increasing level. Gravity sink zone. Level 10-7x Earth gravity. Load material density. 50,000 tons. Body mutation in progress. 45%. Pain level. Extreme. It got harder. Every single second of resisting felt like he was holding the weight of the world. His crystal-infused joints popped and shifted, snapping and reforming, but the nanobots ensured they stayed functional, realigning and fortifying his skeletal structure, keeping his bones unbroken. He could feel it. The nanobots were not just repairing him, they were enhancing him, evolving him into something stronger, something more inhuman. Resist. The whisper came from nowhere, and unconsciously, he gripped harder. The rock in his hands cracked, splitting apart with an agonizing sound as the weight seemed to exponentially increase. But he didn't stop. The nanobots were rewiring his arms, reinforcing every cell and joint to absorb the shock. His hands clenched, fingers bending into unnatural shapes, digging deeper into the mountain's surface. Each second that passed, the blue crystal's energy coursed through him, pushing him further than he thought possible. And when Ryuk felt the rock lighten even a single tiny bit, his teeth grinded together, faint blood leaving the corner of his mouth as he forcefully raised the stone above his head, his eyes flashing a powerful blue energy. Level 10 completed. Difficulty assessed. Lower limit. Level will now increase. Kaboom! And now it got truly hard. The level above his limit. The ground was shattered as Ryuk's left knee instantly gave way and smashed into the gem ground, the rock nesting directly on his knee, pressing it toward the ground. Yet Ryuk's eyes were shut close as he remained in that single kneeling position, silently resisting, but even more, trying to feel the change arising. His muscles began thickening, his frame growing wider, denser, heavier. But it wasn't just muscle. His body solidified with every passing moment, nanobots meshing with the crystal core to create new structures from within. His skin began to glow faintly with a blue hue, and his joints moved with eerie precision, the nanobots now in complete control of his form. The gravity intensified, pressing down on him like a crushing tide. But the more pressure the zone applied, the more the nanobots recalibrated. They restructured his body into something monstrous, a combination of living steel and crystallized nanotechnology, capable of withstanding this overwhelming weight. His remaining standing knee buckled as the force nearly shattered his spine, but the nanobots surged to life once more, fusing with his bones, reinforcing his structure. Ryuk's body twisted, spindles of nanotech wrapping around his muscles, locking them in place as his spine expanded, becoming more like a column of living crystal, unyielding and inflexible. Gravity Sink Zone. Level 15, 15x Earth Gravity. Load Material Density. 100,000 tons. Body mutation in progress. 60%. Pain level. Unbearable. With shut eyes, Ryuk's body began expanding and then, boom, the floor burst apart, as Ryuk's knee instantly moved up, smashing onto the ground with a powerful heave. He began rising up himself, his spine straightening as his hands bulged harder and harder, and slowly began to push above his neck. With his bodily evolution, the stone, once a mere burden, began to change in his hands, started getting lighter. His joints were becoming like nanobotic hinges, capable of supporting unimaginable mass. His arms were expanding with unnatural speed, metal threads weaving through his skin, turning his entire form into a mechanized titan. Level 15. The force of gravity grew heavier, but now Ryuk's body had adapted. He felt himself rising instead of sinking. The blue crystal energy coursed through his nanobots, channeling strength, feeding his muscles, altering his body in ways that no human could ever comprehend. And then, the air flapped, and with one final heave, Ryuk's eyes flashed open as he once more raised the stone above his head. "One more to go!" he screamed inside his head, and the notification didn't delay its time before everything instantly changed. The mountain stone in his hands grew heavier still, expanding in size, as if it were infused with his own power. It began to grow even darker, a stone of dense, obsidian-like texture, but tinged with the same crystal glow that pulsed in his chest. Gravity Sink Zone. Level 25, 30x Earth Gravity. Load Material Density. 500,000 tons. Body mutation in progress. 85%. Pain level. Overload. His back arched as his spine cracked and then began rapid expansion. Ryuk could feel the nanobots coursing through him, his very bones reinforced with the crystal-like substance. Every nerve was sharpening, recalibrated by the nanotech network. The rock in his hands continued to grow, pushing the limits of gravity, breaking its bonds as the weight increased exponentially. But then, it wasn't enough to truly crush him, and in no time, Ryuk's ascent began once more as he forcefully resisted the crushing and pushed back harder and harder, his body widening and widening before finally he pushed up fully. System quest completed. Very good host, now this is truly the last time. The host is on the premise of a major awakening. You must resist with all your will. Bring it on. Level 20 completed. Difficulty level, insane. Final level will now begin. The second notification panel flashed. The sound of cracking began. And Ryuk's eyes flashed when he didn't feel himself sinking yet. When he looked at his arms, he watched as his nanobotic blue gem body began cracking away, and that crack spread throughout the rest of his body. I'm being destroyed. The thought echoed in his head as his teeth grinded together, followed by an ear-deafening roar escaping his lungs. The air itself began wavering around him, space destabilizing, as the gem floor at his feet fully caved into nothing, the ground ripping apart, and then Ryuk himself began sinking in, but his body was also becoming unrecognizable. The nanobot's surface fully cracked completely, but then it began revealing something else. Something sleeker beneath the cracks. A skin that was a seamless fusion of living nanotechnology and crystalline structure. The pain was so massive that for a time Ryuk felt nothing at all. All that he knew was he was bearing something difficult and hard, and after what seemed like an eternity, the torment finished. System alert. Physical transformation complete. Nanobot fusion. 70%. Warning. Exceeded capacity. His vision blurred, the weight too much to bear, but he didn't care. With his body having fully adapted, he heaved up the rock before throwing it away into the distance, watching as it pierced through space with speed before disappearing as if it never existed, leaving just flashes of blue. Then, the sound of knees crashing into the ground. Congratulations, host! You have awakened a skill ingrained in the Anunnaki model. Interesting. He managed to reach the peak test level of the gravity sink zone. That is something I designed for an eternal stage being to find entertaining. The words echoed in the clouds where High Scholar Emery stood. A smirk of acknowledgement was on his face as he gazed at Ryuk's kneeling figure. But then something caught his eye as he paused on his feet and noticed something wrong with Ryuk. For one, the machine-looking young adult who had been heaving up and down like a deranged beast suddenly went silent. And then, High Scholar Emery's eyes flashed as he looked beyond Ryuk and turned his gaze to the sky, watching a bizarre aurora suddenly appear above. A deep hum escaped his lips, as silvery circles appeared in his eyes. This is a celestial phenomenon. He mused to none but himself, but his eyes soon flashed as 3 runic circles of silver appeared in his eyes, before flaring with disbelief. This is no ordinary celestial phenomenon. This is a celestial birth acknowledgement, High Scholar Emery said in shock as he cautiously stepped backwards. His eyes falling down as he watched the aurora in the sky concentrate into one revolving vortex of multiple colors, and then, the sound of an object passing through space resounded as High Scholar Emery's watched the light in the sky illuminate below and shine on the figure of one who remained kneeling silent on the track. It's him? The celestial acknowledgement is for him? High Scholar Emery's gasped as he descended from the sky. His eyes locked onto Ryuk, and then they flashed with a deep light of disbelief as he began watching a change. A change that he had never seen before in his almost 1,000 years of existence. The nanotech model he saw right now kneeling on the ground had been found by him, and he, of course, knew its shape. While at first sight it was indeed captivating to the eye, it was undoubtable that the form was bulky and a bit unfitting. It looked like any regular machine life form, one designed by an individual who lacked a sense of artistry. If not for the energy waves the body exuded, one would mistake the Anunnaki model as nothing but just another inferior life form. But now, right before his gaze, he watched as that Anunnaki model, which he fused with Ryuk, began getting destroyed. It all started as a hairline crack that snaked across Ryuk's bulky armored shell-like body, glowing faintly with golden light. At first, the fractures were small, spider webbing across his blue gem-like nanotech surface. But then, with a sound like shattering stars, his outer body shattered. Shards of dense armor burst outward, scattering into the air like dying embers, incinerating the grounds and leaving nothing but an abyss in their wake. Even the runic protection lines etched onto the deep ground were cruelly torn through from the explosion, as smoke rose into the air. But then High Scholar Emery's gaze pierced through this smoky covering, his eyes flashing with a feverish light. From within the wreckage, a figure stepped forward, bathed in soft golden light. The new Ryuk was breathtaking. His form had slimmed and refined into something sleek yet deadly, no longer bulky like a war machine, but carved like a work of living art. Even though the words in his head seemed unfitting to describe a masculine entity, they were the only words that could accurately describe what was before him. His torso was tight, elegant, every muscle clearly sculpted yet flowing naturally like the bends of a river, strong but not exaggerated. His chest was broad enough to hint at his strength, but sleek enough to exude agility and nobility. Long, regal arms hung at his sides, layered with elegant lines of white and gold, segmented so perfectly that the muscles seemed to ripple with even the slightest movement, as if a king's robe had been woven into his very flesh. His neck was slender but carried a quiet sturdiness, leading up to a youthful, devastatingly striking face. His jawline was sharp and smooth, his cheeks holding the faint roundness of youth, a reminder that despite the immense power humming through him, he was just as he said he was, only a boy of 17. Cool blue light shimmered in his eyes, not the cold, lifeless glow of a machine that he had before, but the endless calm blue of an untouched sky after a storm. It gave him a look both ancient and innocent, serene yet unreadable. His lips were soft, with a slight hue of pink, almost too delicate for the power he radiated, but it only made his presence even more surreal. His former rough-looking blue hair now flowed back like living metal, short-layered strands of snow white, tipped with faint streaks of iridescent gold, giving the illusion that stardust had settled on him. But what shook High Scholar Emery's heart were the two new additions. Two short golden horns, elegant and smooth, crowned his head, their edges bearing the same golden iridescent light that covered his hair. They were not monstrous nor demonic, but styled like the royal diadems of ancient emperors. The molecular life particles that composed his new form had fused seamlessly with an unknown biological core, making him go from the robotic body to flawless skin radiating with the subtle warmth of life that had been perfected. His entire body exuded a faint shimmer, like moonlight reflected on still water, whispering of power beyond human, yet paradoxically, more human than ever before. Around him, the world seemed lesser, yet seemed to be part of him, as if it were from him in the first place. Even amongst machines, even amongst gods, his form alone, along with his aura, would reign him as royalty. High Scholar Emery swallowed thickly, as his eyes faintly quivered. This wasn't what I designed. This feels beyond me. He muttered but then paused in his tracks as he watched him slowly raise his gaze to meet his. His gaze like that of a high being that unconsciously made him want to burst out with all his power and lay down his dominance. Yet, that gaze soon turned soft, before he watched the most innocent smile bloom. High Scholar Emery's? I did not expect you would stick around to watch me exercise. The words were enough for him to drop his actions of wanting to show his superiority and unleash his aura as he descended downwards towards Ryuk, who stepped forward, coming to arrive before him the moment his foot touched the ground. I could feel the intense motion of space being pierced with speed, and therefore came to check, hence why I'm here, he replied. He's been watching me ever since I was still on the track zone, and I had no idea at all. He most likely saw through the transformation. What about you, Ryuk? Yes, High Scholar Emery's? Ryuk replied. Why are you here training at night? High Scholar Emery said, and Ryuk replied almost instantly. I do not like my inability of being able to walk on my own 2 feet. Oh, High Scholar Emery said before thinking. Pretty sure no one wants that. But what's more infuriating to me is I feel like I can walk on my 2 feet. Just that, I haven't quite figured it out yet. He continued as High Scholar Emery's eye flashed. Explain to me more. This feeling of yours, he asked as Ryuk moved his attention to his hands. It's the feeling of knowing your fingers are meant for grasping something, but not quite yet being able to move them into a close. It felt like my body is a rusty old piece of technology that isn't well calibrated. And I thought if I move my legs repeatedly enough, I should be capable of walking. And if I resist against a powerful force constantly pulling my body into pressure, then my joints should loosen up and I should gain some bit of control over my body, Ryuk explained, a hypothesis that High Scholar Emery's quickly recorded in his head with interest in his eyes. But then he soon watched as Ryuk paused and turned his body, his eyes filled with confusion. But this? High Scholar Emery's? What is this? He asked, his hand moving up to his head and feeling those horns. Have I become a monster? He asked worriedly. But then, he felt the hand grab at his shoulder, stopping him and bringing his attention back. You're anything but a monster, youngling. Then, how does one explain this? I haven't found time to tell you, but your Anunnaki model has its own underlayer that contains its true body. Something that seemed to be locked behind being able to fully control the body, and why it happened only after you had completed the track and gravity sync zone. Those two strains were enough for your body to shed its previous underlayers, showing the true layer hidden beneath. It has always been there since the fusion, just needing an equalizing force to show itself, which you have accomplished tonight, High Scholar Emery said, nodding as he watched the frightened expression on the kid's face fade away a bit. Oh, that's calming then. What of the Silverunics, though? The elders or those who have seen me previously? They would be alarmed if they see such a massive change in the morning. Won't they? Especially these frightening horns? Ryuk said as High Scholar Emery's chuckled. Don't worry about that. They might be a little curious, but not to the point of messing with you. You're under my guardianship, remember? They might listen well to the king, but won't want to offend me by messing with you either. So far, you don't overstep your boundary, you would be fine, he consoled. Now tell me, how does it feel in this new form? What has changed? High Scholar Emery's asked as Ryuk's eyes flashed, looking at his hands, before he clenched and unfurled them. My body. It's reacting as fast as I am processing it. Unlike before where it seemed to be burdening my mind. It's like it's very well under my control now, Ryuk stated, taking a step forward and another step, and he soon began walking naturally around High Scholar Emery's, whose eyes flashed as he noted Ryuk's walk, watching as it turned into a jog around him and then into a run. Such gracefulness and speed too. He's like he could become one with the wind at any moment. High Scholar Emery's noted, but watched Ryuk pause, his face visibly pale as if exhausted. But just when he wanted to call him off, he noticed Ryuk continued feverishly, almost like a kid who couldn't wait to show off his toy. But the thing that is clear the most is the strength. Earlier it felt like I could barely raise up my hands, but now, my strength has improved massively, Ryuk claimed excitedly as High Scholar Emery's asked. How massive? He asked, before watching an arrogant smirk on Ryuk's face. Are you sure you really want to know? Ryuk said, as his right fist slowly clenched in his grasp, and High Scholar Emery's rolled his eyes before he stretched out a palm. Here, show me all you got, he said to Ryuk, but then watched as Ryuk suddenly moved backward with speed, soon arriving at a distance of 100 meters away from him. Before, vroom, the air flapped instantly as the boy tore forward with his superhuman speed. High Scholar Emery's watched as Ryuk's body shot forward like a catapult, golden light dancing on his hand, which was clenched into a fist, and he watched Ryuk's body fully stretch to the max before his hand lurched forward seemingly with every vestige of power, and then, thump, it was like dropping a stone into a well. Even the clash couldn't be well heard at all as High Scholar Emery's smirked, watching the shocked expression on Ryuk's face as he watched the boy take back his feet, visibly confused. Ho! How? I can clearly feel the growth in strength. How are you not moved? He whispered to himself as High Scholar Emery's laughed out boisterously, grabbing at his shoulder. You have obviously grown in strength, kid. I can feel it. Right now, you should be as strong as a fully fledged thought weaver. That's about 3 times the growth compared to what you could achieve barely some hours ago. That's a lot, if I say so myself, High Scholar Emery said as Ryuk's eyes flashed. But then, his gaze suddenly changed as his feet began wobbling, his body reeling for the side only to be quickly grabbed by High Scholar Emery's. Huh? What's happening? Ryuk mused out as High Scholar Emery's turned to his face, watching it turn ghostly pale, but it seems the boy himself had no idea. Not much. You're just a bit exhausted. That's enough training, youngling. Let's get you back to your room, he said as Ryuk found one of his arms under his neck and was helped forward toward the distance. About 5 minutes later, his house door was opened, and he stepped in, waving High Scholar Emery's a good night before he disappeared into the room. A deep exhale echoed through the bedroom where Ryuk lay, his eyes flashing as he took one final look at the reflection before him, before dimming the light in the bedroom and climbing onto the bed, burying his form beneath the covers. Activate system interface, he ordered in his mind, and immediately the notification changed. Congratulations on completing the quest. Reach level 25 of Gravity Sync Zone. Rewards obtained. Plus 200 stat points unlocked in Strength Stat. Plus 1 low-ranked rejuvenation pill that heals exhaustion. Congratulations. Secret quest completed. Reach the peak of Gravity Sync Zone level. Rewards. Plus 100 release on all locked stats in every attribute. Activate stats, Ryuk ordered, and the notification panel once more changed. Stats, Strength, 1,500 locked. Agility, 1,550 locked. Endurance, 1,750 locked. Intelligence, 390. Charisma, 200. Luck, null. Attribute points available, 1060. My strength and agility are now officially stronger than my previous. Ryuk muttered to himself, eyes flashing, but then watched as the notification changed. You seem to be showing High Scholar Emery's your strength, but that was a lie. What you used in the punch wasn't even 25% of your true strength. You were faking it, the system said, as Ryuk's eyes flashed before he stilled on his side, preparing to doze off but not without first replying. Yes, it was necessary. Well, if it was so necessary, then I don't think you should have revealed the true core to him, should you? Ha! You revealed the true core of it all. That you simply need to run more or carry more to regain your strength. You explained to him the mechanisms, which are very important and should have been kept secret. The system said as Ryuk's eyes flashed in understanding. That too was necessary, he replied, but the system's silence showed him it perhaps wanted to know more. You see, I had to show him, even if I didn't want to. I had to explain clearly, even if doing that could expose my secret. Because, to him, I'm an experiment. The second he senses that I know something but refuse to talk, he will grow wary, and I can't afford for him to grow wary. If that happens, he can simply decide to subdue me in an instant and find out everything through experimentation. Explaining to him, and so fervently too, is a good thing. Most likely, he would think I'm a naive kid that likes to flex everything. Something that would do no one but him much good since he'll get to learn everything needed because of my running mouth. That keeps his guards down and his hopes up, rather than giving him a yes or no answer or short evasion that would make him want to throw me under some machine to figure out what is truly going on. Do you understand now? I understand now. You needed to keep him trusting you, something that can only happen if you were as honest as possible. But then, you also needed to one day get out of his hands and therefore hid your true strength and capabilities. You won't invoke much suspicion by being honest and by hiding your strength. You get to slowly grow up your strength, and faking them will avoid dangerous alterations that could alert him of your terrifying evolution that might make him take actions from fear of potential. The system said as Ryuk nodded his head with a smile. Now you understand. You've awakened a new skill too? The system flashed as Ryuk's sleepy eyes instantly flashed back open. He had heard of the system saying he had awakened something but had been overwhelmed by the transformation next, making him forget it. Activate Skills and Abilities tab. Skills and Abilities, subgroup, Sovereign Lifeform Skill. Sovereign Rewriting, LV.1. Description. Grants the ability to manipulate matter at a fundamental level. The user is capable of altering the density, structure, and composition of non-living material within a localized area. Current limitations. Manipulation range, 5 meters. Maximum manipulatable mass, 50 kilograms. Structural complexity limit. Basic level, non-living, non-complex matter only. Time to reconstruct, 5 seconds per operation. Warning. Intelligence attribute remains insufficient to manipulate living organisms, advanced energy forms, or to perform real-time environmental reshaping. Please level up intelligence to unlock true capabilities of sovereign rewriting. Sovereign rewriting? Ryuk muttered to himself, eyes narrowing at the skill before him as he read the descriptions over and over until he began to gain a bit of understanding of it. According to this, it says I should be capable of altering matter composition. One of non-living material? He muttered to himself, but then, his eyes flashed as he rose up from his bed. Let me try it out one time before sleeping, he thought as he inhaled deeply, exhaling outwards before his eyes flashed open and he called out, "Activate sovereign rewriting." At first, there was only stillness, one that made Ryuk doubt whether he was even doing anything. But then, the very air around him began to warp. A faint golden shimmer radiated from his body, before dispersing outwards, forming strands of golden light which seemed stuck around him in a sphere of 5 meters. Unaware to Ryuk, a blue vortex was spinning in his eyes which remained on the surrounding bizarre light flashing in them as he began noticing. Dust motes in the room around him were suddenly frozen in place, suspended like stars in a void. Subtle strands of light began to materialize, so fine and delicate that they seemed unreal. White golden veins of energy crisscrossed everything within the sphere. The ground beneath him, the bed by his side, the edge of the wardrobe holding the glasses. All were outlined in glowing golden wire energy as Ryuk's eyes flashed in shock when he began noticing something. His vision, for a fleeting moment, blurred into 1,000 fragments and then refocused with such intensity that Ryuk couldn't help but exhale deeply. The world around him had shifted. Where once he saw solid surfaces, the simple bed to his side, the polished floor beneath his feet, the glass mirror leaning against the drawer. Now each object before him was revealing a deeper layer of existence. Lattices, threads, bindings. Quickly, he realized something quite peculiar and unthinkable. The floor beneath his feet became a weave of tightly packed molecular grids, each shimmering like an endless web of diamonds. Each node of the lattice was vibrating with a silent, unknown energy. The bed by his side became a forest of ordered strands, and he couldn't help but notice the metallic frame was thrumming with a different energy, one that was much denser and more stubborn than the mattress. But when his gaze swept to the mirror, he froze. The glass was beautiful, countless atoms linked in delicate, near-perfect patterns, forming a translucent sheet that bent light on its torch. He could now see every bond, every tether between molecules with each piece humming gently in pace. But most importantly, Ryuk could feel them. Like a pianist running fingers across the keys, Ryuk knew he could press, pull, and rewrite these bonds. The bindings had become malleable to him as if, and with that thought, he moved, blinking in and out of existence to appear before the mirror. His gaze locked onto the bond, and slowly, his fingers stretched forward toward its surface. With a simple will, he decided to shift a single bond to another place, and then, shattered glass instantly cracked across the surface from that singular bond removal. Ryuk's eyes flashed in shock, but then, he felt he was capable of more. In the next instant, he ignored the shattered glass and began fully deconstructing those shards. Some pieces of the glass rose into the air and, with a few rearrangements, an object began forming shape before taking hold in Ryuk's grasp. It was a thin glass shard, no longer in the shape of a mirror, but curved like a dagger, its edge glinting. Holding the hilt, Ryuk took a few swings, the sound of slashing echoing through the room. The glass unconsciously dropped to his feet as his eyes flashed in shock, and he couldn't help but exhale deeply. I can change the molecular bonds. If what makes an object are the bonds, then what happens if one of the bonds is pushed away from its regular position? It is an instant destruction as the object falls out of its form. But not only that. By copying the molecular bonds of other objects, I can mold an object into the shape of another. By rearranging the molecular bonds, I can change the broken glass into the shape of a glass dagger. With this ability, every single thing can be changed to another by the simple ability of rearranging, which is essentially rewriting its bonds. Ryuk mused to himself as he turned beneath his feet, looking at the ground, but he saw more than just the ground. His eyes were gazing directly at the atoms of the glassy floor, but then he began to notice a peculiarity, which was that the gaps between the atoms were large. It was loose, barely held together by the strange runic lines that seemed to cover the ground but had already exhausted their energy. And so, with a simple will, he tugged the lattice closer and closer to itself to make the distance between each even firmer. Crack. A 5-inch circle beneath his feet instantly hardened as Ryuk bent down and tapped the space whose lattice he had pulled together. He could feel it heavier, harder to break through. Yet, when he removed his hand and tapped another surface, it felt much lighter. The lattice bonds are far apart and hence made the ground more fragile. But if I bring them together, I can make them heavier. This is the same as increasing the weight class. Sovereign rewriting is a skill that seemingly rewrites fundamental concepts of objects, the atoms, the lattices, reshaping and rewriting them into something else. But wait, if everything in the world was truly formed from atoms and special bonds, then does that mean everything is malleable and capable of being rewritten? What of battle techniques? If there's an order to them, then what if one of the order or bonding that holds the technique is tugged at? Wouldn't the technique fall apart and just explode due to the corrosion of form? Or even more impossible, could the molecular bonds of the technique be taken over by me and rewritten into something else? Ryuk mused to himself, but then, a pounding headache settled into his skull as the shining glow in his eyes instantly receded, and he collapsed backwards onto his bed. Energy. 0. The system notification appeared as Ryuk's blurry gaze looked up at it. Seems like I've exhausted all my energy. But no doubt, I have gained a really good skill with powerful potential. Those were his last thoughts before the exhaustion of all the training finally caught up to him, and his eyes slipped shut. A soft inhale and exhale soon echoed in the room not long after, as Ryuk fell into a deep sleep. For the next morning, golden sunlight filtered through the tall glass window in the room, shining their golden rays on a figure who was peacefully asleep on the puffy white bed. But then, his eyes soon twitched once, only to open in the next second, sending arcs of neon blue light flashing through the room before receding. Ryuk sat up from the bed, as he looked outside the glass, at the sun that shone on the green garden around. His back stretched as he moved his hands to the side, a satisfying crunch soon resounding through the room, and he jumped out of bed in the next second. Talk of a good night's sleep. I feel so alive today, Ryuk shouted out as he rose fully from the bed and moved to the mattress, rearranging it before the notification flashed. Good morning, Ryuk. Any plans for the day? The system asked him as Ryuk's eyes flashed in thought, but before he could reply, the system notification flashed again. Seems like a no. How about checking out the Royalty Kids training? You've not only been given permission to join by High Scholar Emery's, but finally, you could begin your Etherius cultivation with knowledge learned from the class instructor. So what do you say? You in? A mix of gold and green filled the space as the early morning golden sun illuminated the plain grass field, with the green grasses swaying gently from the breeze that meandered through them. Flape, the sound of clothes and hair flapping rang out across the area, coming from none other than a small group gathered together. It was a class consisting of a total of 25 presences. One stood out the most amongst them, a handsome figure who almost seemed no different from the others in the class, save for the 2 silvery golden horns that stuck out of his head, incredibly glaring and attracting about 90% of the attention. That, and the fact that he was the only one who wasn't holding one of those hefty grimoires in his hands. Of course, it was none other than Ryuk. After enough convincing from the system, he had finally decided to attend the Royalty Silvernic class, and here he was. He was already used to the gazes from others back on Endearth, so the students' stares didn't bother him. What bothered him the most, though, was a singular figure who had her eyes narrowed at him all the time, and it was genuinely freaking him out. It was none other than the exceptionally tall lady that sat at the front of the class. Even though he, along with the 23 other runic royalties, were all on their seats, including the instructor before him, she was so exceptionally tall that, even while sitting, she towered at exactly twice the height of those who were standing. And Ryuk wasn't the tallest even amongst the students. His new form was unlike his old one, which stood at about 2.5 meters. The current Ryuk was just about 2.1 meters in height, but some of the silver runics, especially the males, were as tall, with some even taller. Instructor Kiana stood in front of the class, the silver streaks in her raven hair catching the light and making it impossible not to attract attention. But even so, her eyes were mostly on Ryuk among the students in front of her. Why? He's changed. I know well he's the same person I saw peeking through yesterday. But how? How did he suddenly grow so much sleek formality in less than a day? He has skin now and looks nothing at all like a robot. And also, he's grown horns. This is no machine. This is a life form. Something massive must have happened between the time I saw him and now for him to undergo such a massive change. Just what is High Scholar Emery's pulling off this time? She thought to herself, even though her eyes remained as calm as ever. The students were murmuring amongst each other, mostly about Ryuk himself, but then it wasn't all of them. When Ryuk eyed the students, he noticed most of them displayed interest in their eyes, but then there were some, the males especially, whose eyes were dull when looking at him. In fact, they only looked at him once before they directed their attention elsewhere, showing absolute lack of interest. And when his ears picked up on the information about him, one sentence was ringing out peculiarly loud and made him silently click his tongue in distaste, although he remained silent. So that's him. High Scholar Emery's so-called new robot. Wah! He's so handsome. What's with the horns, though? Is he some sort of bull? If I was a bull, none of you would be sitting around me so comfortably. Ryuk thought with a huff in his heart. But then, the sound of throat clearing rang out as the whispering and murmurs quieted down and everyone turned toward Instructor Kiana, whose silvery eyes seemed to look back at each of them at the same time. As you all are soon ready for your coming-of-age ceremony, she began, her voice clear and echoing directly in their heads, impossible to not be heard and even more so, impossible to ignore, and have more or less learned the required runic memorization patterns, with some of you having learned even the 999 ranked raked runic meditation, she said, looking across the class, her eyes faintly pausing on about 10 students. Ryuk only identified 2 of them, the silver runic princess, Filiana, and Eliana. I think we can do something a bit different today. She paused, letting the breeze roll past them. A summary, she said, of all you've been learning for the past 10 years. A summary of Etheric cultivation, up to your current level. Ryuk's ears perked up. Of course, he knew the class wouldn't start all over again just because of his arrival. He was allowed to join, but that didn't mean he was an official student, so he had probably thought he would come here and be informed of all the things he would barely have any idea about. But then, who would have guessed she would go into a summary? That was exactly what he needed right now as a newcomer. A few students straightened up, and for some reason, even the laziest among them looked intrigued by the word summary. So everyone, close your books, and simply listen attentively, she said, smiling faintly as the sound of books closing and being placed to the side filled the air momentarily before she began. Instructor Kiana's face soon lit up, in focus and seriousness, before she began. Let's start from the energies of our world, Metisla, she began. There are 3 main sources of energy: apex energy, etheric energy, and abyssal energy. Apex energy is commonly used by the Gorin and Radon races. It is an energy that focuses on linear, explosive strength increase, tied to natural cultivation and hard work. The energy of elements, as the Radons would argue. It is the traditional power system of the majority of races in Metisla and focuses on gradual energy mastery, she said. The abyssal energy, on the other hand, is a dark, heretical path that is mainly based on spreading void, shrouding identity, and existential corruption. It is the energy of the most powerful foes of us Silverunics, the energy of the Ravenous Walker clan. A dark energy path that takes on the philosophy of taking from the world. It leeches off meaning and power, and the higher one climbs, the more and more they differ from normal morality. It is a dangerous energy path, as it gives great strength quickly but in exchange for intelligence, giving the practitioners of it very increased strength, but lessened logic, resulting in chaotic tendencies. She explained as a thought flashed in Ryuk's head. So it isn't only the nulls that practice abyssal energy. There are other races too, and according to her, this world of theirs seemed to have had a not very good encounter with one of the abyssal races. The Ravenous Walker clan, huh? Why does the name remind me of the Shadow Walkers? He thought to himself, but was forced to focus when Instructor Kiana continued her explanation. And the third energy, which is quite like a middle ground, is Etheric energy. You see, unlike Apex or abyssal energies, Etheric is substantially different. It doesn't crave force like Apex energy does, nor does it crave destruction like abyssal energy does. Instead, it focuses on four things above the rest: the mind, the will, the perception, and the dimensional control. Most will argue that dimensional control is the best, while some will think the will is the only thing that matters. Whatever the choice is, they are right, as these are one of the subfactions that leads one to true comprehension of Etheric. She continued as Ryuk's eyes flashed. According to the blue Ryuk in his mind space, he had been told that Etheric was the energy of the will-giving substance. But from Astralaxia, Ryuk had learned Etheric was more than pressing your will into the world. There was also the dimensional concept of it that seemed to hold so much power. But it seemed these are but branches to the cultivation of Etheric, like subspecies but still leading to the same thing. He thought silently. Just like any other energy, Etheric has its own cultivation stages, and the first of all, like the so-called origin stage of apex energy cultivation, and the sleeper stage of abyssal cultivation. The first stage of Etheric is referred to as lucid spark, she said. Lucid spark, huh? It is here your journey begins. Not with power, but perception. Your inner senses awaken. You learn to feel the quiet hum of Etheric that runs beneath thought. In this stage, you form veins of Etheric, just like how the elemental veins are formed in apex energy cultivation and the voids in abyssal cultivation. But unlike those, the veins of Etheric are all mental conduits through which thought energy flows. Most of you will need active consciousness to form these veins, but for the purest in bloodline of you, these veins will already start to form on its own around the age of 6. Instructor Kiana explained as some of the students looked at others amongst them. Seems like there were some talented enough to naturally form their veins. But it was just like apex cultivation too. Every cultivator is naturally born with their own elemental veins. Ryuk's own were stolen, but Uncle Bob gave him his, ensuring Ryuk could cultivate with no problem. But it was clear that if he wanted to cultivate Etheric, the first thing would be to form new Etheric veins, just like how he formed his void veins. Good to know the first step now, he muttered silently to himself, and Instructor Kiana continued. Once your mind veins have been created, then you consciously begin creating your first constructs, memory spheres, thought shields, and the popular mind palace. Your intellectual capability increases, and you find yourself able to comprehend even more easily. Most importantly, you must ensure your mental realm is very solid. And like most of you here, it will be advised for you to build a mental palace in your thought realm. And when the mind veins have solidified enough, then the second stage begins. The second stage is the Thought Weaver stage. And like the apex energy cultivation where you form an apex core, you instead will have to form a mind core, a singular crystallization of your entire being. It is here that identity, will, and the power to shape the Psi-domain are held. It is very important, and hence why it is essential to form a mind palace while you're at the lucid spark stage. In your mind palace, you will hide your mind core and offer it some form of protection. Kiana's eyes scanned them slowly. You've all formed your cores. Most of you at least, she added, side-eyeing Ryuk, whose gaze couldn't help but dim. You felt the shift. It's not about Etheric energy anymore. It's about weaving perception into something real enough to affect the world. She explained, and some of the students nodded. Now, most of you are approaching the third stage, the Psymancer stage. This is when you begin to project thought outside yourself, where your thoughts are enough to start touching the space between minds, learning to alter, influence, and shape perception itself. A heavy silence fell. In this stage, your mind palace becomes a true mental realm. It is in this stage, the Psymancer stage, that the true power of Etheirys starts unveiling itself. Its battle capabilities, to be exact. There are many ways to channel the energy of Etheirys, but there's one important thing to note. Etheirys is limited in power when let out freely. It can't do much, unlike Apex energy that can be used to cause powerful blasts. Etheirys is mental, so it has almost zero physical damage. But this isn't always right. Our Silverunic race possesses an ancient method of controlling Etheirys energy, one that made us one of the strongest races on Metasla, battle-wise. And that is the memorization of runes, she explained, as Ryuk's eyebrow furrowed in focus, something that seemed to be taken note of by Instructor Kiana, and she decided to explain more. Imagine a quite ordinary weapon of many wild worlds. A simple gun, she asked them, and they nodded. Now, as we all know, what is scary about a gun isn't the gun itself, but the bullet in it. A gun without a bullet isn't too much of a fear. Of course, you can use its end to knock someone's head. But then, there isn't still much to fear. But what happens when a bullet is gotten and placed within? This is the philosophy of our ancestors' creation of runic lines that surround us and are an integral part of our way of life. We have the bullet, but a bullet is not that much of a danger if it's just a bullet. You can throw it, but it won't cause much damage. But then, once the bullet has been placed into the carriage of a gun, it becomes a powerful instrument, no? That's what the runes are. The runes are the case of the gun, and Etheirys is the bullet. Once laced together, then it becomes quite the destructive force. So the runic memorization patterns are just battle arts, used to call out the true power of Etheirys. That makes so much sense now, Ryuk thought silently to himself. But Instructor Kiana didn't dwell on the topic too much before continuing. You all, right now, are Psymancers. With the combination of the about 800 runic combinations that you have learned, each of you should have quite the exceptional combat prowess, one that wouldn't pale compared to that of an Apex cultivator at the peak of the Dominion stage. You all are more than ready to undergo your coming of age. And to remind you all, your coming of age ceremony will be beginning next week. Exactly 6 days from now, she said, and Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed as he watched murmurs quickly fill the air of the class. Someone soon raised their hand and asked, "Where exactly would our coming-of-age ceremony take place?" he asked, and judging by how the other fell quiet, it was the question that was also on their minds. In the past, as you all may know, the ceremony was usually done by taking one to the battlefield with a group of guardians, and once they managed to return alive, they were automatically promoted, she explained, as everyone's expression remained neutral. Yet Ryuk's brows were instantly scrunched up. What kind of shitty coming-of-age ceremony is that? What the hell is even a coming-of-age ceremony in the first place? But with the war being over, that is quite impossible now. But I assure you, the king is already preparing something, and mind you, it will be something that would be more than worth it. Although, I can guarantee it will be just as hard, if not harder. So you all must keep practicing the control of your runic memorization. Trust me, you'll be needing it. Class dismissed for today, she said, and Ryuk watched as the students began rising one by one and started leaving. Soon, only him and Instructor Kiana remaining. Ryuk eventually rose up to leave, but he had yet to take a single step when he felt a piercing gaze on his back. He cautiously paused mid-step and turned backward, only to see those blue eyes on him. "What do you cultivate?" she suddenly asked, and Ryuk raised an eyebrow. "You're not a machine. Your life form. I can see it in your eyes. Every life form cultivates energy. So what do you cultivate? Etheirys? Or Apex energy?" she asked. But then Ryuk watched as her eyes moved to his face. Most precisely to his horns, And then she asked, or abyssal energy? I do not cultivate abyssal energy, Ryuk said first, as her eyes flashed, noticing the disturbed flare in them. She could sense a deep hate flowing through those eyes at the mention of those words. Okay, I have a potential for Etherius. I know that much at least, he said, and she asked, and how do you know that? She asked disbelievingly but watched as Ryuk raised his hand towards her. Instantly, she noted as the space around her fingers began to harden, and Ryuk pressed on the air and weaved with a clear motion, his hand pressing forward but halting. I can harden space to my will by just thinking it. Is that Etherius or Apex energy? He asked her, as her eyebrows furrowed before she nodded. Yes, that's Etherius energy, she said, and Ryuk's eyes flashed when he watched cracks instantly appear around the space in front of him, and his will was ripped through like a knife through butter. His eyes flashed when he noticed something wrong, and he tried taking a step backward, only to feel his back land against a glass wall. You can harden space to your will too? He couldn't help but ask. The lady had done the exact same thing he had been able to do with his Aegis Dragon skill, and that was harden space with his will. It's a basic ability of Etherius. Anyone at the Thoughtweaver stage can pull that off easily, she said to him as Ryuk watched the space that was hardened before instantly relax and air resumed its motion. I can't sense an ounce of Etherius energy from you. Have you truly yet to begin cultivation at all? How then could you naturally pull off such an ability? She asked, as Ryuk shrugged helplessly. Who knows? But it at least revealed to me that I can cultivate Etherius energy, he replied as she nodded her head. Just to let you know, you might be participating in the coming-of-age ceremony with the others, she said as he raised an eyebrow. I'm pretty sure High Scholar Amiris would have informed me of that personally if it's true, he replied as she chuckled. If he didn't want you to join the coming-of-age, he would never have allowed you to come to the class. But don't worry though, you're in safe hands. My hands? She said, as Ryuk watched a faint grin rising through that tattooed face, and he shrugged his shoulders while chuckling. You know, that's a really good act, he said, turning away. Then, vroom. He felt something weaving forward from the back of his head, and his hand instinctively moved behind his head, catching it within his palm. Turning his gaze, he found it to be none other than a blue card that seemed more of a telecommunication device, surprisingly similar to the one Aster possessed. Immediately, a blue light flashed out from the card, and Ryuk raised his gaze as he soon watched the image of High Scholar Amirs appearing, wearing glasses with some backlit revealing some test tubes which he seemed to be working in. His eyes diverted as he came to stare straight at Ryuk, a radiant light in his eyes on getting sight of him. Ah, Ryuk, he greeted enthusiastically, and Ryuk replied with a faint smile. Good morning, High Scholar Amiris. Good to see you. So, you came to check out the class, huh? That's really good. Tell me, how did you find it? He asked enthusiastically, as Ryuk took a breath before replying. Informative, Ryuk replied shortly. Really? You know, you don't have to get intimidated by Kiona over there, he said as he turned to look at instructor Kiona, who was watching, and Ryuk rolled his eyes. No, I'm not. The entire class was a summary of the basics of Etherius, and it was filled mostly with things that I did not know previously. So, yes, it was very informative, High Scholar Amiris. Very good, and just like I hoped. I don't know if I told you this, but for now, you will be under the command of Instructor Kiona, for the entirety of this week at least, he explained as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed before he asked. And why is that High Scholar Amiris, if I may ask? Oh, it's not much really. Yesterday, when you informed me of the feeling you had about your body stiffness that made you feel like if you ran more or placed yourself under more pressure, you could find it easier to move, an increase in physical capability, so to say. I have found out a truth on this feeling of yours, and according to my results, it all pointed to one thing that has been proven correct by my experiments, he said, as Ryuk watched his fingers dangle a test tube in his hand, containing something that seemed like lightning rotating within. And that is what, High Scholar Amiris? If you cultivate Etherius energy, it should help to give you more control over your body, around 5 times more than simple exercising does, he replied, as Ryuk hummed silently, though in his mind, he was reeling from shock. He found out? He found that out from the mere explanation I gave just the night before. Of course, according to the system, Ryuk had been informed that cultivating Etherius would help him regain control. But he never expected that High Scholar Emeries would have discovered it on his own, just simply based on the little cues Ryuk gave him. The summary core is Etherius energy will help flesh out that union of neurons that can, in turn, correlate to having the Anunnaki model easier to control. If you're able to sharpen your senses and mental capability, which Etherius can do, then the control of your body will skyrocket, and hopefully we'll be able to see more of its capabilities. That is why I have requested for Kiona to take some of her day off to tutor you about Etherius energy. I am not sure if you have the capacity to cultivate Etherius, but I have noticed you don't have the capability to cultivate Apex energy, nor do you reek of abyssal energy. The only option left must be Etherius. So it is a hope of mine that with Kiona's help, we both can gain a massive boost in understanding your complex physiology. Do you therefore understand why you are placed under her command now, Ryuk? He asked, diverting his attention from the test tubes to stare at Ryuk, who inhaled before he nodded his head. I understand, High Scholar Emeries. It is good you're able to see the good easily. Nothing is more debilitating for me than ignorant whining. Very well. Kiona, I'll be leaving the youngling in your hands. If you even only manage to reach the peak of the Lucid Spark stage in the week you two will have together, then that will be a significant improvement. I do hope you can put your very best into him, he said, as Instructor Kiona nodded her head from her sitting position. I'll try my best, High Scholar Emeries. Very good. Well, see you in a week, Ryuk, he said, the last image of him being him picking up another test tube, before his silvery holograph faded away, and Ryuk looked at the blue card in his hands which soon started floating in the air before quickly flying back into the palms of Instructor Kiona, who instantly kept it away the second it touched her palms. Ryuk looked into her eyes, watching her smirk, before he inhaled deeply and exhaled, and asked, So, what do I do? She beckoned for him to get closer. Ryuk arrived just a few centimeters from her before she motioned, Sit down, cross-legged. We'll try a first attempt at sensing Etherius and finding your mental veins, she said, as he took his seat just before her. But his eyes furrowed as he asked, I thought just like Apex energy, Etherius would need some sort of manual to cultivate, right? He asked her, and she nodded her head. True. But first, we must first find if you already have mental veins in your brain. If you don't, then it will be necessary to form one, and that is when you will need to get a specific void creation manual. If you already have void veins, things get easier, and you can just get an absorption manual and begin cultivation already. But the first thing is being able to sense the presence of your void veins. That step doesn't need manuals at the moment, she explained thoroughly as Ryuk nodded his head, as he received the order from Instructor Kiona. Eyes closed for meditation, she said, and Ryuk closed his eyes, only to feel a slight ruffle that blew his ear, and he opened one eye to check what it was. But both eyes fell open when he couldn't see Instructor Kiona before him any longer. Instead, he felt a looming presence behind him, but before he could turn his neck, a voice, calm and enchanting, rang out. Eyes closed. I'll try to use my Etherius energy to help you improve the sensory of your Etherius energy until you're able to do it yourself. This will speed up the find. Whatever happens, don't fight it, she whispered softly, as Ryuk felt his bumping heart calming down, but only after ordering in his head. Hey, system. Yes. If you find even the slightest suspicion of harm being tried on my mental, then instantly withdraw it all away like you did with the primordial gate. Okay? Ryuk asked, and the system notification flashed. Very well, host. Good. With that layer of protection, only now can I truly focus. Ryuk's eyes closed, his hand into each other and resting on his folded feet, and behind him was Instructor Kiona, whose palms slowly moved out, coming to rest by the side of Ryuk's head. Silence now, Ryuk. Silence. A gradual descent into silence. Slow, silent. Thoughts fading away. words dispersing, and eventually, the count of his breath began fading away along with it all. The sensory grasp of the air stopped. To enter meditation is to feel the world fade away completely. Like sleep, except you remain conscious. After endless times of cultivating apex energy and meditation, Ryuk was already used to this phase of the training, reaching the perfect meditation state in a little less than 10 minutes. Something that shook Kiona's heart. Not like it was impossible for one to descend faster into a meditation stage, but because it was difficult for one who had yet to start cultivation to find a way to let go of his thoughts so fast on his first try. But all of it was to her advantage. Her hands reached and held the side of Ryuk's head, her nails brushing against those silky white strands, a sensation of extreme softness, but she ignored this sensation. Her mind instead focused on her hands as she began channeling etheric energy. Silvery white aura began blooming around her fingers, wrapping around Ryuk's head like a cocoon. Feel the etheric energy in the air. Feel it in every strand of existence around you, she whispered softly into his ears, like the words of a demon in the ears of a sinner. And Ryuk, through the silence of it, first felt the sensation. The warm energy that rested on the side of his head, but then this energy began changing, acting as a form of conduit that seemed to call on a force. His eyes squinted as he tried to see this object, but the more he tried to feel it, the more he felt himself grasping for it, the farther it seemed to fade away. Kiona, from outside, could see the stress on Ryuk's face, the realization dawning on her, and she whispered, Don't force it. Just hang with it. Keep conscious of it and exercise patience. It will reveal itself in time, and then you chase it to wherever it may lead you. The key is not to rush, but to wait patiently, she whispered as Ryuk stopped trying to see whatever it was. Instead, he now chose to silently wait, and as he continued silently waiting, keeping conscious of the energy, he then began to notice the world changing. It was a simple manifestation through the darkness. A beautiful blue petal, dots of light that faintly ran through the darkness. Ryuk's mind tried to reach for it, but then, don't force it. The words echoed in his head as his arms, reaching for the dots of light, halted in the air and then slowly retracted back. Don't force it, he muttered to himself. And that was when the darkness changed completely. The instant he decided not to chase after the singular dot, they suddenly swarmed from behind. Hundreds of thousands of dots that began slipping out into the darkness, instantly drawing his attention as he watched them increase and increase even more. His eyes marveled at the sight of the aura that was secreted by the pure energy, but he made no movement to ruffle it. Watching as the blue dots increased, swarming into each other, not with randomness, but with a defined form and intent. And then, Ryuk watched as they seemed to beckon to him through the darkness. In a large swarm, they all began heading in a clearly directed path through the illuminated darkness. It will reveal itself in no time, and then you chase it wherever it may lead you. Kiona's voice rang out in his head, and finally, Ryuk got his affirmation to follow. Unlike before, when it seemed so difficult to reach out, this time it felt like he was gliding through the air, simply following the dance of those dancing motes of blue. And after traveling for as long as he could keep count, he felt a brilliant light in the distance, like one traveling through a dark tunnel which suddenly opened to the outside world in the end. Attention-grabbing, as Ryuk made his way forward, calmly. Yet his heart jumped faster the closer he got to the open hole. And when the blue dots of energy entered and Ryuk followed in, it was the sensation of weaving through a portal. When next he opened his eyes, Ryuk's jaw dropped to the ground. What the hell? The first word that came to him was an ant standing in the sky to look down on humans. Right now, Ryuk was standing in the sky to look at what was below him. But what was below him was nothing normal. Below was a realm of dark and blue, a realm of interlocking tunnels, each larger than Ryuk by thousands of times and seemingly trailing for kilometers. From these tunnels, Ryuk could sense shimmering runes that glittered on their scaly surfaces, shining with such powerful light that completely illuminated this realm. It was the same as the void veins, except about 1,000 times huger. But what was most shocking about it all was chains. They were ginormous, darker chains that locked tight the tunnels of blue, their pitch-black light covering the blue energy that was seeping out from the veins. In fact, the blue lights that filled the realm were like the tiny residual rays that somehow managed to slip through the cracks of these huge devilish chains, something that shocked Ryuk speechless. These are no doubt my mental veins. But why? Why are they all chained up? Ryuk mused to himself in shock. And in the next instant, the world before his eyes cracked into nothing like glasses. And then, a deep inhale left his lips as he opened his eyes to the sight of the blue sky, his heart weaving up and down as if he had just run a marathon. But then, a face appeared at the edge of his vision, looking at him worriedly. "Hey, Ryuk, you okay?" the voice asked as their hand reached for his cheek, only to be grabbed at the last second, and they withdrew it. Ryuk slowly rose up from his lying position into a sitting position, groaning a bit as his head pounded within his hands. "What went wrong with you?" "Went wrong?" "Yes." Suddenly, everything was going smoothly, but then, you fully lost consciousness and just fell backward. You remained unconscious for 5 minutes before finally opening your eyes. It was very sudden, she explained to him as Ryuk's head cleared and his eyes flashed with the memories of what he saw. "So, did you find the mental veins?" she asked him, as his eyebrows furrowed before he asked, "Tell me, are they usually very big, looking like tunnels instead of veins that you call them?" he asked her, watching her pause, looking at him weirdly. "Some people have etherous veins that are bigger than others. In fact, the bigger the etherous veins, the better. But the biggest recorded are the size of pinky fingers. There's no such thing as tunnels for etherous veins." "No, they're never so big," she explained to Ryuk, whose eyes flashed before he turned to her. "Let's try it out one more time. For me to confirm things properly," he asked, and she looked into his eyes for a while before she shrugged her shoulders. "Fine. Sit up properly," she instructed, and just like before, Ryuk sat up properly, and she placed her hand around his head, helping him channel Etherius. Ryuk remained even more quiet this time, and it didn't take long for him to find those blue dots that he quickly began to follow through the darkness. Just like before, he soon found the end of the dark space, and when he stepped inside, it was the same feeling and the same sight. Him standing in the sky and looking below, blue-veined tunnels interlocking all around, and chaining them tightly were 6 ginormous dark chains. But this time, Ryuk didn't pay much attention to that. Instead, he focused on looking at the dots of Etherius that had come in with him, moving into the veins of blue. He watched as the light in the veins momentarily increased, banishing the dark aura surrounding the chains, albeit in a very small amount. But it was instantly clear to Ryuk. There are chains holding my mental veins. There is no doubt about that. Perhaps this is what had stopped me from being able to sense Etherius at all in the first place. But it is clear. Absorbing Etherius into the veins erases this dark aura on the chains. If I absorb enough Etherius, I will completely eradicate the dark aura on the chains and most likely destroy the chains altogether. He mused to himself, and without wasting any more seconds, Ryuk focused instead on trying to reduce the dark aura with the help of Instructor Kiona. "I need to create a small space and break some part of the chains so that I would be able to sense Etherius by myself and not always need her help." And like that, he focused, trying to absorb more Etherius. The sensation took quite some time, but it continued as more dots of blue began swarming into his mental world, entering into his mental veins, and then the blue light from his veins slowly began increasing and increasing, the dark chains around it dulling in their dark light before. The sound of a powerful breaking echoed through the area as Ryuk watched one of the chains crack into pieces. And then, powerful blue lights instantly bloomed through the space as Ryuk felt something connect. Instantly, his body connected with his physical form as he regained something peculiar. When he opened his eyes, he was standing before in the garden. But this time, he could see the world much clearer. In every single particle around him were blue dots of light, like the ones in his dark consciousness, and now, he could absorb them by himself straight into his mental world. Turning the side of his head to look at Instructor Kiona, who slowly took her hand back. I can see the Etherius now, he said, as her eyes beamed with light before getting furrowed. You can see them? She asked, and Ryuk nodded, pointing to her. Yes. You're surrounded in this silvery dust of Etherius, and they are a lot around your fingers, he explained as he looked at her hands, and her eyes flashed in surprise. What? Is it not possible to see Etherius? He asked her, noticing her bizarre expression, but she shook her head. It is possible. I too can see Etherius. But that is an ability that can only be gotten after one has broken through to the Thoughtweaver stage. In the Lucid Spark stage, it is nothing but a feeling. It is never really so clear, she explained as Ryuk nodded his head slowly. I can see it though. I guess, lucky me then? He replied, but then his eyes furrowed when he looked at the sky, and the sun was already setting. They had taken so much time. Now that you can clearly see the Etherius, it should be easy for you to absorb them into your mental veins. And speaking of your mental veins, have you been able to see their real size? How big are they? She asked him as Ryuk looked at her before raising and pointing to his index finger. They are as big as this, once my sight was cleared. Wow, that's huge. It's advantageous as bigger veins means more energy capability to be stored. But bigger veins also means slower cultivation speed because you will need more Etherius to fully fill your mental veins completely. That would require more time in meditation than others, but it will be worth it in the end, if your Etherius circulation speed is not too slow, she explained as Ryuk nodded his head. Tomorrow I will see to getting you a manual to boost your cultivation speed, of course on High Scholar Emery's permission. But for today we end the training here. Don't be late for class. And see you tomorrow, Ryuk, she said to Hai before she rose to her feet and slowly walked into the distance. And he soon watched as her figure seemed to disperse into dots of light that scattered into the distance. A faint smile on Ryuk's face as he waved at her disappearing figure. But once it faded away, Ryuk's hands, waving, slowly paused before clenching hard. His slight smile slowly began to fade away, followed by the sound of teeth clenching. Bastards! They locked my Etherius veins. Ryuk thought in anger as his eyes looked down at the huge veins beneath him, watching the dark aura that covered everything. It was no doubt. They had placed chains around his own mental veins, stopping him from being able to access Etherius. Bastards! Seems like the body they took wasn't enough. They needed to lock the mental veins too. Ryuk thought with a distasteful click before he removed his consciousness from the mental realm, getting back to the real world. Ho! I can't afford to lose it now. I need to focus, Ryuk whispered to himself as he calmed down, ebbing his brewing anger. After a couple seconds of silence, he felt the rising anger settle back within him. It didn't leave. No, it could never leave. But it settled, and that was all he needed for now. Hey, system, Ryuk called in his head. Yes, host. Were you able to see the mental realm? He asked the system, which blinked out once more. No, host. A powerful array of energy is around host's mental realm that prevents the system's consciousness from reaching through. The system has no idea of what happened, but it seems the host's mental veins are as big as his index fingers. Those are notable sizes. Congratulations, host. Ryuk scoffed. No, they're not as big as fingers, he added, pausing. They're the size of tunnels. Gigantic tunnels with no end. Ryuk replied as he watched the system pause before it blinked once more. Wow, host. Those are huge sizes. According to my database, the information given by Instructor Kiona is correct. The most talented cultivators will possess large mental veins of the size of their fingers. The largest recorded by the system's database is the vein being as big as the host's own arm. But those are for extraordinary races with extraordinary attunement with Etherius energy. If host's veins are like tunnels, then such is not recorded in the system's database. That is simply beyond comprehension. The system's notification flashed, and Ryuk didn't even know whether to be happy or sad. But if there was one thing clear, the veins. They're locked. Locked? Yes, they're locked. There are some unnaturally dark chains oozing with powerful dark aura all covering the entirety of the veins, dimming their light. With Kiana's help, I've been able to crack a hole, and that's the only way I could even sense Etheirys right now. In short, my veins are unusable until I crack all of the chains binding it, he explained to the system, which flashed with light. That is not normal, but to hosts, special condition, then that truly makes sense. Host seems to have been targeted by an extremely powerful group, and it seems they truly are hellbent on limiting host strength. But if host's veins are the size of tunnels, there are significant advantages and disadvantages. The first advantage is, even if host is at the lucid spark stage, if all of his mental veins are filled with Etheirys, the energy capacity would rival that of a Cymancer due to the huge sizes. That means host running out first of Etheirys energy while clashing with a cultivator at the same level is close to impossible. But the problem is, with such huge veins, cultivation speed will be incredibly slow. Other veins are small, and so they will be able to fill faster, but with host's huge veins, progressing through cultivation levels will be slower. And now that host needs to first crack open the veins, then that time might have just jumped up to 3 times more. The system said as Ryuk furrowed his eyes. But of course, there are solutions. And what is that? If host's cultivation veins are abnormally large, then trying to use normal cultivation manuals will of course make host spend years and receive little results. The only way for host to progress faster is to use cultivation techniques that are simply beyond the norm, ones as anomalous as host's own mental veins. And now with host possessing a vast amount of purchase points, host can access a special area of the shop. Within, host can find anomaly Etheirys cultivation. According to host's needs, the cultivation manual will be one that has the quickest Etheirys absorption speed. I can narrow down and bring out a range of Etheirys cultivation manuals that will be most helpful to the host. Does host wish for me to start the scanning? The system asked as Ryuk nodded his head. Very well then. The system will begin scanning through the forbidden part of the shop and looking for suitable manuals. It said before it waited in silence for about 5 minutes. Then a notification flashed. 2 most suitable Etheirys cultivation manuals have been discovered. Let me see them. Forbidden Shop Area, Sub. Etheirys Forbidden Techniques, 1. Titan's Mindflow Sutra Description. A forbidden mental cultivation technique designed exclusively for beings with abnormally large mental veins. This sutra enables the absorption of Etheirys in massive torrents and uses natural compression pressure to weaken internal vein locks over time. Impossible to cultivate for most beings due to its overwhelming flow volume. Cost: 60,000 points. Benefits: tailor-made for host's colossal mental veins, allowing unmatched Etheirys intake capacity. Generates layered energy plates, which passively grind against chained locks until they rupture. Boosts Etheirys storage by 300% upon unlocking each chain node. Grants passive trait, Mind Reservoir, gradual Etheirys regeneration over time, even while unconscious. Limitations: requires full completion of each cycle. Interrupting the process leads to mind stagnation. Etheirys temporarily becomes unresponsive. Overabsorption may trigger mind flood, vein swelling, temporary memory disorientation, and sensory loss. Only death awaits those who try to cultivate it with normal or small-sized mental veins, hence why it is forbidden to 99% of cultivators. 2. Soul Engine Spiral Scripture Description. A rotating compression-based technique that weaponizes the user's own mental veins as spiral engines. By spinning Etheirys into tightly wound coils, this technique generates combustion surges capable of cracking chained mental seals through brute internal pressure. Cost: 40,000 points. Benefits: high-speed Etheirys absorption and burst compression cycles for explosive breakthroughs. Each ignition shockwave can crack or weaken locked chain points inside mental veins. Grants new skill: Cerebral Ignition. Sacrifices a portion of mental stamina to create a 3x Etheirys burst for 1 action. Grants passive trait: Spiral Instinct. Mental reaction speed increased slightly with each completed cycle. Limitations: ignition can cause neural burnout if used excessively, leading to headaches, memory flickers, or momentary unconsciousness. Unstable emotion spikes during use. Cultivator may experience erratic behavior. Dangerous for weak-willed users. Requires intense focus and emotional control. Really powerful techniques. Ryuk muttered to himself as he looked to and fro between the two techniques. The first one was appealing in the sense that it was perfect for an anomaly like him. His mental veins were huge, so huge they were abnormal, and the first technique, Titan Mindflow Sutra, was the most perfect fit for this. The technique worked better the larger the mental veins were, and with Ryuk's own immense mental veins, it was like a match made in heaven. But the second technique was equally as alluring. Why? Because of the extra skills Ryuk could gain from cultivating it. It had a skill called Cerebral Ignition that could help him unleash more power by burning his mental stamina. It also granted a passive skill called Spiral Instinct that increased his reaction speed. But he didn't like it for one reason. Among its dangers were the words, unstable emotion spike during use. Cultivator may experience erratic behavior. So the words unstable emotions were something Ryuk could no longer ignore. Not after his last act of tearing through the skull of a fallen with a single slash, without even thinking straight. The Void Aura Grimoire had already made his emotions unstable. If he added this technique, it might just worsen everything. And apart from the skills, there really wasn't anything tempting about the technique. It didn't seem to be tailor-made for him like the Titan Mindflow Sutra. And if there was one thing he had discovered, the Titan Mindflow Sutra was more expensive. Ryuk could indirectly refer to it as being superior to the other. Otherwise, the points required for both would have been the same. So in the end, he made his choice. Buy the Titan Mindflow Sutra. Does host truly want to purchase the Titan Mindflow Sutra for 60,000 points? Yes, Ryuk replied without a doubt. Congratulations. Host has purchased the Titan Mindflow Sutra. Purchase points left. For 140,000. I still have a lot of purchase points left, he mused, but then raised his hand forward and something fell onto it. It was none other than a ginormous grimoire, the size of Ryuk's own torso. It looked like a book meant to be read by a 1,000-meter-tall titan. Ryuk's eyes flashed as he looked at the book. Around it were shimmering golden lights, some sort of Atheros energy faintly wrapping around the book. My Atheros energy is blue. The Silverunix Atheros energy is silver. But this is golden. I wonder if my blue Atheros energy will be forcibly changed to golden once I cultivate the technique. Ryuk mused to himself, looking at the ghost of the glowing form on the book. But then he shrugged his shoulders as his gaze turned to look around him. The garden was incredibly quiet, the sky a shade of orange from the fading sun, and some stars were beginning to appear. I'll be cultivating all night long. I want to remove all the chains from my vortex before the next sun comes out. Ryuk muttered to himself, but then the notification suddenly flashed. I'm thinking, Ryuk. The chains you said were surrounding your mental veins. The system said before hesitating as Ryuk paused in action, narrowing his eyes. And what about that? I was just thinking that perhaps they weren't placed there by your enemies. Perhaps they were placed there by your own people. Because your mental veins are weird. If they're as gigantic as they are, perhaps they were afraid of what the energy waves from such power could do. According to my scan, the power from mental veins as big as yours would be enough to fry even a titan brain to nothing. Perhaps the chains were meant to protect you and were placed there by your own family. The system advised as Ryuk thought about it but then scoffed just as quickly. Oh, placed by my family to protect me, you say? Have you forgotten how I got in a robotic body in the first place? My family were the ones who took everything away from me. Why would they protect me if they took everything away? And somehow the only way they could protect me was by placing chains on my mental veins and stopping me from absorbing Atheros. Oh, that's what a familial protection looks like to you? Ryuk asked, as the system quieted down before replying. Your words hold some truth in them, but better safe than sorry. If you unleash those chains and all of the energy bursts out, prepare yourself, because the amount of Atheros that will flood into you is something I don't think your consciousness can handle without suffering severe damage. The system said, but Ryuk shrugged it off. I know what I saw. Those chains aren't meant to protect. They are meant to restrict. The dark aura around them is abyssal energy, which could have only been from the nulls. And if there's one thing I know about the nulls, it's that they seek nothing but destruction and pain. He thought before his hand reached for the grimoire, and he opened up the first page, quietly studying its contents. Surprisingly, it was a lot of pages. The end of every chapter was filled with warnings that would ensure his death in a blink. It was an incredibly difficult technique with a great amount of danger, but Ryuk pushed through, silently taking as much time as he needed to comprehend it. Soon, he forgot about the outside world completely, entirely immersed in the technique. After exactly 8 hours of reading the manual over and over again, Ryuk finally shut the manual closed, inhaling deeply and raising his gaze to the sky. Now the dark was fully out, leaving nothing but the shiny stars above his head. I understand the Titan Mindflow Sutra now, Ryuk mused to himself, and in the next instant, he rose to his feet. Unlike many cultivation arts that required sitting cross-legged, the Titan Mindflow Sutra required one to remain standing on their feet. And once he was on his feet, his hands slowly came together as he began forming various hand sigils. His eyes began to close, and after silently folding hand sigils for close to an hour, a column of air began roaring up, soon swirling over Ryuk's body and zipping all around him with power as Ryuk's feet slowly left the ground and he was taking higher and higher into the sky by the column of air. But through it all, his hands never paused from forming the sigils, and soon his lips began moving in synchronization. Rintakar vo ithers. Amval thren os natruk. Yzvaltor eman ralthus. Jengwen takor ven karas. Rintakar vo ithers. Amval thren os natruk. Yzvaltor eman ralthus. Jengwen takor ven karas. Within the unending column of rising, powerful air currents was none other than Ryuk, floating rhythmically amidst the chaos, his lips moving endlessly along with his hands, whose speed seemed to increase faster and faster. A powerful howling sound began echoing through the darkness of the night, but he was far too gone to pay attention, as the true battle wasn't in the physical. It was right there in the mental realm. Once more, he found himself in the realm of the interlocking tunnels and the chains. But this time, Ryuk wasn't alone, nor was he powerless. He could feel the entire realm shaking mightily, as if a dragon were falling into the sea, as he looked at the entrance where he came from. The realm soon burst open with an incredible amount of Atheris, erupting like a titan through the gate, and the first thing it did, smashed directly against those gigantic chains. Kaboom! The devastation that followed was unthinkable. Ryuk felt an incredible, powerful wave smash straight into him, yet his will flared out even more in power as he called more and more of the Atheris in the air, slamming it powerfully against the chains that cloaked his mental veins. Immediately, the blue light of his veins could no longer be concealed, as they all began to flood out of the cracks spreading faster and faster. The dark aura of the chains didn't seem to be able to resist the flood, as they began getting dispersed. Ryuk grinned triumphantly, but it was all short-lived. As the chains realized they could not endure the powerful wave of Atheris, the shattered remnants of dark aura formed very distorted sigils, snapped together, and began converging before the entrance of Ryuk's mental veins, where the Atheris was flooding out from. They twisted, merged, and bled into one, taking the shape of something that shook Ryuk's heart to the core. A colossal claw, blacker than the void, trembling with insane hatred and defiance. It blocked the entire opening, refusing to give way as the Titan Sutra tried to pull in more Atheris, but was blocked absolutely. The collision between the opposing force of Atheris and the gigantic claw was so powerful that the Ryuk outside, in the real world, spurted out blood from his eyes, nose, and ears, as an intense radiation of pain surged through the Ryuk within the mental realm. It was a colossal headache that threatened to rip through skull faster than a diving greatsword would try to. But there was nothing but rage and madness as Ryuk sensed the aura coming from those huge, devilish claws. It was the same hateful aura. The null. Damn the nulls. The anger was something that reverberated through his soul. Ryuk's lips in the physical opened wider and moved faster, growing louder and louder, echoing through the sky, drowning even the sound of the powerful howling of the column of air. Atheros energy poured forth from everywhere, through space, the air, all gushing into him and straight into the mental realm as Ryuk's eyes flared with fury. "You can't restrict me," he roared at the giant claw. And in the next instant, Ryuk's will gushed forth, melding into the approaching Atheros. In an instant, the Atheros began taking shape under his will. From deep inside, the Atheros surged forth as Ryuk forcefully continued the Titan Sutra, the Atheros energy surging powerfully once more. It was chaotic, golden, unstable, and under his will, began twisting into a weapon so massive that it bent space within the metal realm. It was an equally colossal golden sword. He forcefully halted the movement of the hooked tendrils, letting them gather close to the edge of the entrance into his mental realm, as he called forth more and more Atheros from the world. The air howled powerfully, a mixture of dark and golden lightning cascading through the sky as the Atheros from even the deepest parts of the void were forcefully drained by the Titan Sutra. Ryuk poured it all into creating a gigantic sword that spanned over 2,000 meters in pure length. When he felt his body finally break down, all of his strength leaving him, stopping him from making any more runic signals, Ryuk used the very last of his will to force the gigantic sword through the wall. It pierced forth with power toward the huge devilish claws that instinctively reached out toward it, their gigantic fingers slamming tightly against the edge of the sword, cracks spreading all over its golden surface. "Go away!" In the real world, kaboom! Ryuk's ear ruptured within. His mouth exploded into blood, and his eyes instantly snapped open, revealing nothing but a chaotic darkness with cracks spreading out from his pupils. The system notification screamed out in horror. "Warning! Warning! Neurological breach. Vital threshold of brain force has been exceeded. Host brain will be fried to nothing if this is continued. Host must stop now. RYUK. Stop now or you will die." But Ryuk threw back his head, veins bulging out of his eyes, swarming across his face as he screamed into the universe with every drop of madness he had left. "Then I'd rather die than lose to the nulls." The last surge of Atheros detonated inside him. It wasn't refined, just Ryuk's own raw will and insane defiance as he forced out every bit of the Atheros with the aid of his Titan Mindflow Sutra, which was forcibly activated once more. The sword, which had been littered with cracks, folded tightly by the dark claws, rebounded with a final war cry of energy. The golden sword tore through the claw, ripping its palm in half, shredding its infernal energy and sending cracks racing along its core like lightning through bone. The claw howled loudly, shaking the entire metal realm as it died. Not with sound, but with true mental force. And then boom! It shattered into nothing. The remaining chains, already weakened, snapped and also burned into nothing but oily shadows. And then it came crashing forward. Atheros flooded into the realm. Ryuk's mental veins lit up. And then something awakened from the depths of the mental veins. Something beyond and ancient. The entire mental veins began oozing out with powerful blue lights. But the source of the blue rays of light, the appearance of new runic lines over the mental veins. As more Aethiers flooded into them, the runic lines began spreading all over their surfaces. And then, Ryuk watched in disbelief as his mental veins began breaking down. They all began dividing into a pillar each, breaking further down, as the runic lines over their surface began shining with even more light. And then, after the veins had all clearly been divided into standalone pillars, a new transformation began. They began fusing, but this time in an orderly fashion. Like the fusing they ought to be before they were separated. The transformation was quick. The blue light in the mental realm blinding up until a point when there was nothing but a cocoon of blue light formed by runic lines. The sound of whirring and Atheros flooding in momentarily blinded all of Ryuk's senses, resulting in him losing his mental faculty for a short while, or maybe a long while. Time wasn't something he could keep up with either, but something soon arose. A deep aura that shook Ryuk to the depth of his soul as he opened his eyes to look at the realm. But now, it was no more. Something had taken its place in the center of the blue void. It was a figure. the figure of a creature, the skeleton. The bones were made of his mental veins, flickering with light, and as he began looking through the mental veins and seeing its true arrangement, his eyes kept widening all the same until he finally got the full view. The shape, it was that of a dragon? Yes, it was exactly as he saw it. The tunnels had changed their arrangement, and now they were in the shape of a dragon, one with no flesh or organ, but with the tunnels coming together to form what would seem like the bones of it, in the shape of a true skeleton. The dragon's two huge claws hung by its front, brandishing, its huge legs pointing downwards toward the void of the mental realm. Its four gigantic wings spread out behind it, and its neck was raised up high into the sky of the realm. Its maw seemingly opened up, and at the end of the maw, Ryuk felt there ought to be something there. The draconic skeleton was in the motion of soaring into the sky while opening its maw as if to roar in anger, or to form a ball of energy. The instant the transformation was complete, a beautiful blue energy surged toward the entirety of the space, brightly illuminating the area. In the physical world, gasps, a powerful gasp resounded through the night sky, with the column of air having already cleared up. The darkness in Ryuk's eyes all began fading away, leaving his blue eyes to regain their glow. His mouth, which had been blown apart previously, instantly began reforming itself as a barrage of blue dots of etheric energy bathed the entirety of his body, seemingly healing him of all the injuries sustained. And when Ryuk's eyes finally regained their light, his hand reached for his throat, gnawing at it as he felt an incredibly hot wave of burning energy in them. It was like something was birthing forth, and if he didn't release it, it would kill him. In the next instant, beyond Ryuk's own conscious effort, his body flew upwards into the sky as he soared through the clouds with speed. A blue phantom of energy surged out from behind Ryuk, taking the shape of something, the shape of a gigantic blue dragon spanning over 5,000 meters in pure mass. And then, Ryuk threw his head back and delivered a beastly roar that surged through the clouds, parting everything for close to a 100-meter radius, as he forcefully released all of the energy in him, and the dragon phantom followed the same motion, also roaring out loud, albeit with no sound. It was the motion of it roaring in defiance at the heavens themselves, like an ancient slumbering dragon finally awakening. When the roar finished, the phantom of the dragon faded away, and Ryuk soared back downwards, his consciousness snuffing out halfway, and just when he would smash into the ground, a hand suddenly reached out and grabbed his body before it could land, slowly bringing him downwards as the figure's feet touched the ground. A suspicious expression was shown on the Titan instructor Kiona, whose eyebrows furrowed slightly as she looked at the soft expression of the boy, who seemed to have fallen into a peaceful sleep. She had left Ryuk previously, but then, instead of leaving for the royalty home, had stuck around the area for a small work. This had enabled her to instantly sense the anomaly of air being blown around and had prompted her to instantly check it out as the pulse where she had left Ryuk. When she had arrived, all she saw was the phantom of a creature that left her unable to move a single more inch, followed by an inhuman roar that struck fear and reverence into her heart. And the pressure had faded away after the roar, along with that of the creature, and she watched Ryuk tossing down from the sky unconsciously, her hand reaching out to grab him. Her gaze flashed as she looked at Ryuk, her expression debating something before finally, she turned her head to look at the top where his home was. Less than a second later and she moved toward the distance, quickly disappearing in that direction. It had been barely 100 seconds after she left that a total of 9 presences clad in silvery robes appeared in the sky above the royalty Chiden training grounds. Their eyes narrowed as they looked at the surroundings. They were none other than some of the elders along with some guardians who had noticed a great disturbance followed by a heart-shaking aura that had shook from their divine sense. But when they looked around, the place was incredibly quiet, the aura having already faded away, as if it was all within their imagination. The only thing that proved something had really happened was that the clouds above this part of the area had been cleared for some reason, allowing the starlight to bathe down at the green grass. But apart from that, there was nothing. Spread out and find any anomaly. Now, one of the elders ordered, as they all instantly took different paths, spreading in search of whatever was responsible for the aura they had felt. And out of all these chaos, a person remained in one of the houses close by the training grounds, tucked within the covers, the sound of gentle breathing echoing through the dimly lit room.